In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a pace that seemed almost forgotten by the rest of the world. The air was crisp, especially during autumn, when the leaves turned fiery shades of orange and red, painting the landscape like a masterpiece. At the heart of this charming little town stood the Mountain View Inn, a quaint hotel with ivy-covered walls and large windows that overlooked the valley below. It wasn't fancy or modern, but it had something far more valuable: character. For decades, travelers passing through the area had spoken fondly of its warm hospitality and cozy ambiance. The inn had been in the Leavitt family for generations, passed down from parent to child like a cherished heirloom. Currently, it belonged to Charles Leavitt, a soft-spoken man in his mid-40s who preferred blending into the background rather than standing out. Unlike many business owners, Charles didn't care much for attention or recognition. He loved the inn dearly, not because it brought him wealth or status, but because it held memories of his childhood, days spent running through its halls, playing hide-and-seek with his cousins, and listening to stories told by his grandmother around the fireplace. To him, the inn wasn't just a building, it was home. Charles's wife, Emma Leavitt, worked part-time as the receptionist at the inn. She wasn't obligated to take on the role since they owned the place, but she enjoyed interacting with guests and making sure everyone felt welcome. Emma was outgoing and cheerful, the kind of person who could strike up a conversation with anyone. Her bubbly personality contrasted sharply with Charles's reserved nature, but their differences complemented each other well. While Charles handled the behind-the-scenes work, managing finances, overseeing repairs, and ensuring everything ran smoothly, Emma greeted visitors with a bright smile and made them feel like they were part of the family. Despite owning the inn, Emma often joked that she barely knew anything about its history beyond what Charles occasionally shared. She wasn't particularly interested in the intricacies of running a business or the legacy of the Leavitt name. Instead, she focused on creating memorable experiences for guests, whether it was recommending the best hiking trails in the area or surprising families with homemade cookies after check-in. People adored her for her kindness and genuine enthusiasm, which added an extra layer of charm to the already beloved inn. One crisp autumn morning, as golden sunlight filtered through the trees, a call came into the inn that would set off a series of unexpected events. A woman with a clipped professional voice informed Emma that Robert De Niro, a name that meant nothing to her, was planning to stay at the inn while scouting locations for a film project. Emma jotted down the details without giving it much thought. After all, celebrities weren't exactly a common sight in their sleepy little town. To her, this was just another reservation, albeit one made by someone with a slightly unusual name. Word of De Niro's impending arrival spread quickly among the staff. The housekeeping team whispered excitedly about preparing his room, while the chef brainstormed ideas for meals that might impress him. Everyone seemed thrilled at the prospect of hosting such a renowned figure, but Emma remained unfazed. She hadn't recognized the name immediately, and even when someone mentioned that he was a famous actor, she shrugged it off. "He's probably just here to relax," she said with a laugh. "I doubt he'll want any fuss." What no one realized, not even Emma, was that this seemingly ordinary booking would soon spiral into chaos. Unbeknownst to her, the room reserved for De Niro was also coveted by someone else: Harold Leavitt, Charles's estranged uncle. Harold rarely visited the inn, but when he did, he expected to be treated like royalty. His arrival coincided perfectly with De Niro's, setting the stage for a collision of egos and priorities. Harold Leavitt was a tall, imposing man with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. He prided himself on being a successful businessman, though his ventures often left him at odds with the rest of the family. Over the years, he'd grown distant from Charles and the rest of the Leavitt clan, choosing instead to immerse himself in his own pursuits. Despite their strained relationship, Harold still viewed the inn as part of his heritage and insisted on staying in the penthouse suite whenever he visited. When Harold checked in, he demanded the best room available, the very same one reserved for De Niro. Emma, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of guests due to a regional conference taking place nearby, made a split-second decision. Without realizing the significance of either guest, She reassigned De Niro's reservation to a standard room. She figured he wouldn't mind since he didn't strike her as someone who cared about luxury. After all, how different could one room be from another? As fate would have it, Charles happened to overhear the mix-up while visiting the front desk later that afternoon. His eyes widened in disbelief as he processed what Emma had done. Not only was this a potential PR disaster, but Emma still had no idea that Harold was related to them, or that Charles owned the hotel. Frustrated yet unable to fault her for her innocence, Charles decided to let the matter slide. For now. Little did anyone know, this simple oversight would lead to revelations, misunderstandings, and moments of growth that none of them could have anticipated. From the bustling lobby to the quiet corners of the inn, tensions simmered beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the stage was set for a story that would test loyalties, challenge assumptions, and ultimately bring people closer together. The day of Robert De Niro's arrival started like any other busy morning at the Mountain View Inn. The lobby buzzed with activity as guests checked in and out, luggage lined up near the front desk, and the staff scrambled to keep everything running smoothly. Emma, seated behind the reception counter, was juggling phone calls, room assignments, and last-minute requests from visitors attending the regional conference nearby. It wasn't unusual for the inn to get hectic during events like this, but today felt particularly chaotic. Between handling complaints about Wi-Fi issues and reassuring a frazzled mother whose toddler had misplaced his favorite toy, Emma barely had time to breathe. Amidst the whirlwind, Harold Leavitt strode into the lobby with an air of authority that demanded attention. Dressed in a tailored suit and carrying a sleek leather briefcase, he looked every bit the successful businessman he claimed to be. His commanding presence turned heads as he approached the front desk, where Emma greeted him with her usual cheerful smile. "Good morning, Mr. Leavitt," she said warmly, recognizing his name from the reservation list. "Welcome back to the inn." Harold nodded curtly, though his expression remained stern. "I trust you've prepared my usual accommodations?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Emma hesitated for a moment, glancing down at the reservation book. She knew exactly what he meant. The penthouse suite, the inn's most luxurious room, complete with stunning views of the valley and a private balcony. It was the kind of space reserved for special occasions or high-profile guests. Unfortunately, it was also the same room already booked for Robert De Niro. Emma's mind raced as she tried to come up with a solution. She didn't want to disappoint Harold, especially since he always seemed to carry himself with an unspoken expectation of perfection. At the same time, she couldn't simply cancel De Niro's reservation without raising questions or causing further complications. Making quick decisions under pressure wasn't something she excelled at, but she knew she had to act fast before Harold grew impatient. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Leavitt," Emma began, choosing her words carefully. "There's been a slight mix-up with the reservations due to the conference. However, I can assure you we've upgraded your stay to ensure your comfort." Without waiting for his response, she grabbed a keycard and gestured toward the staircase. "Your new room is ready, and I think you'll find it quite lovely." Harold raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "What do you mean by a mix-up?" he asked sharply. "Are you saying someone else has taken my suite?" Emma forced a reassuring smile, hoping to diffuse the tension. "Not at all, sir. We just had to make some adjustments to accommodate our full house. Trust me, you won't be disappointed." With that, she handed him the key card and pointed him in the direction of the newly assigned penthouse suite, the very one originally reserved for De Niro. Harold accepted the card reluctantly, muttering something under his breath about incompetence, but he eventually made his way upstairs without further argument. As soon as Harold disappeared from sight, Emma let out a sigh of relief. Crisis averted, or so she thought. What she didn't realize was that her snap decision had set off a chain reaction of unintended consequences. Charles, who happened to walk into the lobby moments later, immediately sensed that something was amiss. He noticed the faint look of worry on Emma's face and the hurried scribbles in the reservation book. Curious, he leaned over the counter and glanced at the entries. "Emma," he said softly, trying not to sound accusatory. "What's going on here? Why did you move Uncle Harold's reservation to the penthouse?" Emma looked up, startled. "Oh, Charles, you scared me." "Well..." She hesitated, unsure how to explain herself without sounding foolish. "We're completely booked because of the conference, and Mr. Leavitt insisted on having the best room available, so I reassigned someone else to a different room to make sure he was happy. No big deal, right?" Charles's eyes widened in disbelief. "Do you even know who you reassigned?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "That room was reserved for Robert De Niro." Emma blinked, momentarily confused. "Robert? Who?" "De Niro," Charles repeated slowly, emphasizing each syllable. "You know the actor? One of the biggest names in Hollywood?" Emma stared blankly at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "An actor? Really? He's staying here?" "Yes, he's staying here," Charles exclaimed, lowering his voice when a few nearby guests glanced their way. "He's here scouting locations for a movie, and now you've given his room to my uncle." Emma's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as the gravity of her mistake sank in. "Oh no," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. "I had no idea. Honestly, Charles, I didn't recognize the name. I thought he was just another guest." Charles sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This could have been handled better," he muttered, more to himself than to Emma. While he was frustrated by the oversight, he couldn't bring himself to stay angry with her. After all, Emma's intentions were always good, even if her execution sometimes left something to be desired. Still, the situation was far from ideal. Giving the penthouse suite to Harold meant they'd need to find a way to placate De Niro and hopefully prevent him from leaving bad reviews or canceling future stays altogether. Later that afternoon, Robert De Niro arrived at the inn. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, he blended in seamlessly with the other guests, showing none of the pretense often associated with celebrity status. When Emma greeted him at the front desk, she greeted him with the same warmth she extended to everyone else. "Welcome to the Mountain View Inn, Mr. De Niro," she said brightly. "We're so glad to have you with us." De Niro smiled politely, nodding his thanks as he signed the registration form. If he noticed anything unusual about the check-in process, he didn't let on. Emma handed him a key card for the standard room she'd assigned him, explaining that it was one of our coziest options. Again, she failed to mention the change from the penthouse suite, assuming he wouldn't care either way. After all, he struck her as the kind of person who appreciated simplicity over extravagance. For the rest of the evening, life at the inn continued as usual, or as close to usual as possible given the circumstances. Guests mingled in the lounge, sipping hot cocoa by the fireplace and sharing stories of their travels. In the dining area, the aroma of freshly baked bread and hearty stews filled the air, drawing people in for dinner. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Harold, lounging in the penthouse suite, basked in the luxury of his surroundings, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding downstairs. Meanwhile, Charles paced nervously in his office, debating whether to intervene or let things play out naturally. Emma, determined to make things right, decided to take matters into her own hands. She approached De Niro during dinner, introducing herself and striking up a casual conversation. To her surprise, he was incredibly down-to-earth, chatting amiably about his love for small towns and quiet retreats. As they spoke, Emma grew increasingly fond of him, marveling at how humble and approachable he seemed despite his fame. It wasn't until much later that night, as Emma lay awake reflecting on the day's events, that she realized the true weight of her actions. Not only had she inadvertently created a logistical nightmare, but she'd also stumbled into a web of relationships and expectations she hadn't fully understood. Her husband's connection to Harold, her own role as the owner's wife, and the potential impact on the inn's reputation. All these factors swirled in her mind, leaving her anxious yet oddly hopeful. Perhaps, she thought, this mess might lead to something unexpected. Maybe it would even teach them all a valuable lesson about communication, humility, and the importance of paying attention to details. As the evening unfolded at the Mountain View Inn, the atmosphere grew increasingly charged with tension. The mix-up involving Robert De Niro and Harold Leavitt lingered like an unspoken shadow over the inn, affecting everyone in subtle but undeniable ways. Emma, despite her initial confidence in handling the situation, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time she passed Charles in the hallway, or caught him glancing at her from across the room, she noticed a flicker of frustration in his eyes. It wasn't anger. Charles wasn't the type to lose his temper, but rather a quiet disappointment that stung more than any harsh words ever could. Meanwhile, Harold Leavitt had settled comfortably into the penthouse suite, completely unaware of the commotion he had inadvertently caused. He spent much of the evening lounging on the private balcony, sipping whiskey and admiring the breathtaking view of the valley below. At one point, he ventured downstairs to the lounge, where he struck up conversations with other guests. With his booming voice and larger-than-life personality, Harold quickly became the center of attention. He regaled the crowd with tales of his business successes, dropping names and boasting about his connections in high places. At one point, he even mentioned his esteemed family, casually referring to the Leavitts as though they were royalty. "Must say," Harold declared, raising his glass in a mock toast. "It's always refreshing to see how even celebrities can't compete with the Leavitt name. We've built this inn from the ground up, you know. Generations of hard work, dedication, and vision." Several guests nodded politely, impressed by his bravado, while others exchanged amused glances. None of them realized that Harold hadn't actually contributed much to the inn's success, or that his relationship with the current owner, Charles, was strained at best. Emma overheard snippets of Harold's monologue as she passed through the lounge, carrying fresh linens for the housekeeping staff. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, not just because of Harold's blatant self-promotion, but also because she still hadn't connected the dots between him and Charles. To her, Harold was simply a demanding guest who expected perfection. Nothing more. She hurried away, eager to avoid further interaction, but not before noticing the way Charles hovered near the edge of the group, his expression unreadable. Later that night, after most of the guests had retired to their rooms, Charles finally confronted Emma. They met in the small office tucked behind the front desk, a cozy space filled with stacks of paperwork, old ledgers, and framed photographs of the inn's history. The dim light cast long shadows across the walls, giving the room an almost somber feel. Charles closed the door gently behind him and turned to face Emma, who sat perched on the edge of the desk fidgeting nervously with a pen. "Emma," he began, his tone measured but tinged with exasperation. "Do you have any idea who Robert De Niro is?" Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "You already told me. He's an actor. A big one, apparently." "Yes, a very big one," Charles replied, his voice rising slightly. "He's been in dozens of iconic films, won multiple awards, and has millions of fans worldwide. People pay thousands of dollars just to attend events where he might make an appearance. And now, thanks to your mix-up, he's staying in a standard room instead of the penthouse suite we promised him." Emma winced, guilt washing over her. "I'm sorry, Charles. I really didn't know. You never told me he was famous. And honestly, I don't keep up with celebrities. I thought he was just another guest looking for a peaceful getaway." Charles softened, recognizing the sincerity in her apology. "I know you didn't mean any harm," he said, pulling up a chair and sitting beside her. "But this isn't just about De Niro, it's about Uncle Harold too. Did you notice how he acted tonight? Boasting about the Leavitt legacy as if he owns the place." Emma frowned, confused. "What do you mean? Isn't he part of the family?" Charles hesitated, debating whether to reveal the truth. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, technically. Harold is my uncle, my father's younger brother. But we haven't exactly been close over the years. He left town decades ago to pursue his own ambitions and hasn't looked back since. Whenever he visits, it's always about what he wants, never about reconnecting with the family. And now, thanks to you, he's taken the penthouse suite meant for De Niro." Emma's eyes widened in shock. "Oh no. I had no idea he was related. To you, why didn't you tell me earlier? I guess I didn't think it mattered, Charles admitted, running a hand through his hair. Harold and I don't talk much, and when we do, it's usually awkward. I didn't want to burden you with our family drama. But now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now it feels like everything is spiraling out of control. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air, pressing down on both of them. Emma felt a pang of guilt, not just for the mix-up, but for the strain it was putting on her marriage. She had always prided herself on being supportive and attentive, yet somehow, she'd managed to overlook key details that mattered deeply to Charles. Meanwhile, Charles wrestled with his own frustrations, torn between defending his wife and maintaining peace within the family. Determined to make amends, Emma decided to take action. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, she slipped into the inn's archives, a dusty, forgotten corner of the building where old records and memorabilia were stored. Among the piles of yellowed documents and faded photographs, she stumbled upon a collection of family portraits. One picture in particular caught her eye, a young Charles standing beside Harold, both of them smiling broadly as they posed in front of the inn. The image was striking not just because of its nostalgia, but because it revealed a side of Harold that Emma had never seen: warm, approachable, and genuinely happy. As she studied the photograph, Emma began to piece together the fragments of Charles's story. She realized how deeply the rift with Harold must have affected him, even if he rarely talked about it. For years, Charles had carried the burden of fractured relationships and unspoken resentments, all while trying to uphold the inn's legacy. Emma felt a surge of empathy and determination. If there was any chance of salvaging the situation, she needed to address not just the immediate problem with Niro, but also the underlying tensions within the family. Armed with newfound resolve, Emma returned to the lobby, where she found Charles reviewing invoices at the front desk. "Listen," she said firmly, catching his attention. "I messed up and I take full responsibility, but I'm going to fix this. For the inn, for Niro, and for us. Together." Charles looked up, surprised by her conviction. "What are you planning to do?" Emma smiled, a spark of mischief lighting up her eyes. "First, I'm going to apologize to Niro properly. Then, I'm going to figure out a way to smooth things over with Harold. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find a way to bring everyone closer together, including your uncle." Though skeptical, Charles couldn't help but admire her optimism. "All right," he said, offering a small smile. "Let's give it a shot." Little did they know, their efforts would lead to unexpected revelations, heartfelt apologies, and moments of reconciliation that would transform not only their lives but also the future of the Mountain View Inn. The next morning, Emma woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The weight of her mistake still lingered, but instead of letting it paralyze her, she decided to channel it into action. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in hand, she mapped out a plan to address the growing complications at the Mountain View Inn. Her goal was simple: repair the damage caused by the mix-up, mend strained relationships, and ensure that everyone, guests, family, and staff, left feeling valued and respected. It was an ambitious undertaking, but Emma had always been someone who thrived under pressure. Her first step was to speak directly with Robert Niro. She didn't want to wait any longer. Delaying the conversation would only make things worse. After taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, she approached him during breakfast. He was seated by the window, quietly enjoying a bowl of oatmeal while reading a newspaper. Despite his fame, there was something disarmingly ordinary about him, a calmness that put Emma at ease. "Good morning, Mr. Niro," she said softly, standing a respectful distance away. "Do you have a moment? I'd like to talk to you about your stay." Niro lowered the newspaper and looked up, his expression neutral but curious. "Of course," he replied, folding the paper neatly and setting it aside. "What's on your mind?" Emma pulled up a chair and sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "First, let me apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced. I made a mistake when assigning your room." I reassigned the penthouse suite without realizing its importance or significance to you. To be honest, I wasn't aware of who you were until later." To her surprise, Niro chuckled lightly. "It's all right," he said with a shrug. "I'm not here for the suite. I just needed a quiet place to work and relax. The smaller room is fine. It reminds me of simpler times." Relieved but still determined to make amends, Emma pressed on. "Even so, I feel terrible about the oversight. If you'd like, we can move you to the penthouse immediately. We'll also upgrade your stay free of charge as a gesture of goodwill." Niro raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "You don't have to do that," he said. "But if you're offering, I won't say no. Truthfully, though, what matters most to me is the atmosphere of a place, not the size of the room. So far, I've found this inn charming and welcoming, thanks largely to people like you." Emma blushed, touched by his kindness. "Thank you for understanding," she said sincerely. "And please, if there's anything else I can do to make your stay more comfortable, don't hesitate to ask." With that settled, Emma turned her attention to Harold Leavitt. She knew addressing him would be far trickier than speaking with Niro. Harold was unpredictable, quick to criticize, and carried decades of unresolved tension with Charles. Still, Emma believed that honesty and humility could go a long way, even with someone as difficult as Harold. She found him in the lounge, nursing a second cup of coffee and flipping through a magazine. When she approached, he glanced up briefly before returning his focus to the page. "Ah, the receptionist," he said dryly. "Come to check if I'm satisfied with my accommodations." "Yes, actually," Emma replied, forcing a polite smile. "I wanted to personally thank you for choosing to stay with us again. Your loyalty means a great deal to us." Harold smirked, clearly pleased with the compliment. "Well, I suppose the penthouse suite is somewhat acceptable," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Though I must admit, I expected better service, given the Leavitt name." Emma nodded, choosing her words carefully. "We strive to provide the best experience possible for all our guests, including you. However, I need to confess something. There was a mix-up with the reservations and, well, the penthouse was originally booked for another guest." Harold's eyes narrowed instantly. "What are you saying? That someone else should have had my room?" "No, not exactly," Emma clarified quickly. "The other guest ended up being accommodated elsewhere, and they were very understanding about the situation. But I wanted to be upfront with you because transparency is important to us, and to me." For a moment, Harold simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he burst into laughter. "Oh, this is rich," he said, shaking his head. "So you gave my nephew's precious penthouse to some random traveler, and now you're groveling to make sure I don't cause a scene?" "It wasn't a random traveler," Emma admitted hesitantly. "It was Robert Niro." Harold froze mid-laugh, his amusement turning to disbelief. "Niro? As in Robert Niro?" "Yes," Emma confirmed, bracing herself for his reaction. "He's staying here to scout locations for a film project." To her astonishment, Harold didn't explode with anger. Instead, his demeanor shifted entirely. A sly grin spread across his face as he leaned forward conspiratorially. Well, he murmured. "This changes everything. Imagine the story I could tell at my next business luncheon. How I shared the penthouse suite with none other than Robert Niro himself." Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. You didn't share the suite with him. He's in a different room." Harold waved her off dismissively. Details. What matters is the narrative. Besides, maybe I'll invite him for drinks later. Networking never hurts, does it?" Before Emma could reply, Harold stood up and strode toward the lobby, leaving her momentarily stunned. She couldn't decide whether his reaction was a blessing or a potential disaster waiting to happen. Either way, she hoped Niro wouldn't be too put off by Harold's antics. Later that afternoon, Emma met with Charles in the garden behind the inn. They sat together on a wooden bench surrounded by vibrant autumn leaves, discussing the day's events. Emma recounted her conversations with both Niro and Harold, emphasizing their surprisingly positive outcomes. "I think we dodged a bullet," she said, exhaling deeply. De Niro seems genuinely happy here, and Harold, well, he's oddly thrilled about the whole thing. Maybe too thrilled. Charles chuckled, shaking his head. That sounds like Uncle Harold, always looking for an angle to exploit. Still, I'm glad things are smoothing over. Thank you for handling this so gracefully. Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I couldn't have done it without you. You've been patient and supportive, even when I messed up. Honestly, this whole situation has made me realize how much I take for granted. Your feelings, the inn's history, everything. Charles smiled softly, his gaze softening. We all make mistakes, Emma. What matters is how we learn from them. And seeing you tackle this head-on has reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place. Their heartfelt moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Turning around, they saw Harold walking toward them, his usual swagger replaced by an uncharacteristic hesitance. Mind if I join you two? He asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. Emma and Charles exchanged a glance before nodding. Of course, Charles said, shifting slightly to make room. Harold sat down awkwardly, clearing his throat. For a few moments, no one spoke. Finally, Harold broke the silence. Look, I owe you both an apology, he began, his tone unusually sincere. I've spent years criticizing this place and treating it like it owes me something. But seeing how hard you work to keep it running, and how much it means to you, I realize I haven't given either of you enough credit. Emma and Charles exchanged another surprised glance. This was not the Harold they were used to. Encouraged by his vulnerability, Charles spoke up. We appreciate that, Uncle Harold. It hasn't been easy navigating our differences, but maybe this is a chance to start fresh. Harold nodded slowly, a hint of regret flashing in his eyes. Maybe it is. Either way, consider me less of a nuisance moving forward. And who knows, maybe I'll even stick around to see how this movie project turns out. As the sun dipped, below the horizon casting a golden glow over the garden, the three of them sat in companionable silence. Though challenges still lay ahead, the seeds of reconciliation had been planted. And for the first time in a long while, hope filled the air, not just for the future of the Mountain View Inn, but for the family ties that bound them all together. The days that followed were transformative for everyone at the Mountain View Inn. With the initial chaos of the mix-up behind them, Emma, Charles, and Harold began to navigate their newfound understanding with a mix of caution and optimism. Each interaction, no matter how small, seemed to chip away at the walls they had built around themselves over the years. What started as an accidental blunder was slowly turning into an opportunity for growth, healing, and connection. Emma took the lead in mending relationships, driven by her determination to make things right. Her apology to Robert De Niro had gone better than she could have hoped, and his gracious response only reinforced her belief in the power of honesty. Encouraged by this success, she decided to extend the same sincerity to Harold. Though he had initially struck her as arrogant and self-centered, Emma now saw glimpses of vulnerability beneath his brash exterior. Determined to bridge the gap between him and Charles, she made it a point to include Harold in conversations and activities around the inn. One afternoon, while De Niro explored nearby hiking trails, Emma invited Harold to join her and Charles for tea in the garden. The setting was picturesque, crisp autumn air, rustling leaves, and the faint aroma of pine drifting through the breeze. As they sipped their drinks, Emma gently steered the conversation toward shared memories. Do you remember when Charles used to play hide-and-seek in the inn's halls? Emma asked, glancing at Harold with a warm smile. He told me stories about those days, how much fun he had running around with his cousins. Harold chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Oh, I remember. That boy could disappear faster than anyone else. Always hiding in the dumbwaiter or under the front desk. Drove the staff crazy, but we couldn't stay mad at him for long. Charles laughed softly, shaking his head. I forgot about the dumbwaiter. Mom nearly had a heart attack when she found me stuffed inside like a piece of luggage. For the first time in years, the three of them shared light-hearted laughter. It felt strange yet comforting, a reminder of the bond they once shared before life pulled them in different directions. Emboldened by the moment, Emma pressed further. It sounds like the inn has always been a special place for your family. What made you decide to leave town all those years ago, Harold? The question hung in the air, and for a moment Emma worried she had crossed a line. But Harold didn't shy away. Instead, he sighed deeply, his expression softening. Ambition, mostly. I wanted more than what this little town could offer. Back then, I thought success meant leaving everything behind. Family, traditions, even this inn. But looking back, he paused, staring out at the valley below. Looking back, I realize I left a lot of important things behind too. Charles nodded, his voice steady but kind. We've missed having you around, Uncle Harold. Not just here at the inn, but in our lives. Maybe it's not too late to change that. Harold studied his nephew for a long moment, surprise flickering in his eyes. Then, with a wry grin, he said, You know, maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I stopped chasing ghosts and started appreciating what I still have. The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Over the next few days, Harold made a conscious effort to be less critical and more supportive. He complimented Emma on her hospitality skills, offered suggestions for improving the inn's marketing strategy, and even pitched in to help during busy shifts. His transformation wasn't overnight. He still had moments of impatience and sarcasm, but the effort was undeniable. For the first time in years, Charles felt a sense of camaraderie with his uncle, and Emma welcomed the change with open arms. Meanwhile, Robert De Niro continued to enjoy his stay at the inn, blissfully unaware of the emotional upheaval happening behind the scenes. True to his word, he spent most of his time exploring the area, taking notes, snapping photos, and sketching ideas for his upcoming film project. When he wasn't outdoors, he mingled casually with guests, chatting about everything, from local history to favorite movies. Despite his fame, there was an authenticity to him that put people at ease. He treated everyone equally, whether they were wealthy businessmen or families on vacation. On his final evening at the inn, De Niro hosted an impromptu gathering in the lounge. He stood near the fireplace holding a glass of wine and thanked everyone for their warmth and hospitality. This place has reminded me why I fell in love with storytelling in the first place, he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. It's not about grandeur or glamour, it's about connection, about finding beauty and simplicity and meaning in everyday moments. And that's exactly what I found here. His words resonated deeply with Emma and Charles, who exchanged proud smiles. Even Harold, seated in a corner with a glass of whiskey, looked moved. After the speech, De Niro approached Emma and Charles privately. I want to thank you both again for everything, he said warmly. Not just for accommodating me, but for creating such a welcoming environment. I'd love to feature this location in my film, and perhaps recommend the inn to colleagues in the industry. Emma beamed, overwhelmed with gratitude. That would mean so much to us, Mr. De Niro. Thank you. As De Niro prepared to leave the following morning, the entire staff gathered in the lobby to bid him farewell. Emma handed him a small gift basket filled with homemade treats and a handwritten note expressing their appreciation. De Niro accepted it with a smile, promising to return once filming began. As his car disappeared down the winding road, the atmosphere at the inn shifted once again, not with sadness, but with renewed energy and purpose. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of De Niro's visit became evident. Word of his endorsement spread quickly, drawing inquiries from filmmakers, travel bloggers, and curious tourists alike. Reservations poured in, revitalizing the inn's reputation and ensuring steady business for months to come. Yet the real transformation wasn't financial, it was personal. For Emma and Charles, the experience strengthened their marriage in ways neither had anticipated. By confronting their frustrations and vulnerabilities, they learned to communicate more openly and appreciate each other's strengths. Emma embraced her role as co-owner of the inn with newfound confidence, while Charles allowed himself to lean on her support during challenging times. Together, they formed a partnership rooted in trust and mutual respect. As for Harold, he became a regular presence at the inn, visiting often to check on operations and reconnect with his family. Though he still had moments of stubbornness, his Involvement brought a fresh perspective and a renewed sense of pride in the Leavitt legacy. Slowly but surely, the rifts that had divided them began to heal, replaced by a shared commitment to preserving the inn's charm and spirit. By the time winter arrived, blanketing the valley in snow, the Mountain View Inn had undergone a quiet revolution. Its halls echoed with laughter and conversation, its rooms welcomed visitors from near and far, and its owners faced the future with hope and unity. Through mistakes, misunderstandings, and moments of grace, the inn had proven itself to be more than just a building. It was a place where lives intersected, hearts opened, and second chances flourished. And though the story of the mix-up would eventually fade into memory, the lessons it taught would endure, reminding everyone that sometimes the smallest decisions can lead to the greatest transformations. Winter settled over the small town like a soft white blanket. The air grew crisper, the days shorter, and the landscape transformed into a serene wonderland of snow-covered trees and frost-kissed windows. At the Mountain View Inn, life continued to hum with a renewed sense of purpose. What had once been a quiet retreat nestled in the hills was now bustling with activity, thanks in no small part to Robert De Niro's glowing endorsement. His recommendation had sparked interest far beyond their expectations, drawing filmmakers scouting locations, journalists writing features, and travelers eager to experience the charm that had captivated him. For Emma, Charles, and Harold, this new chapter brought both challenges and rewards. The influx of guests meant longer hours, more responsibilities, and occasional hiccups, but it also brought laughter, excitement, and opportunities to grow closer as a family. Every guest who walked through the inn's doors became part of its story, adding layers of warmth and vibrancy to its already rich history. Emma threw herself wholeheartedly into managing the increased workload. She hired additional staff to help handle reservations and housekeeping, ensuring that every visitor felt welcomed and cared for. Her natural charisma made her a favorite among guests, many of whom praised her attentiveness and kindness. But perhaps the most remarkable change was how confidently she embraced her role as co-owner, alongside Charles. Gone were the days when she doubted her abilities or dismissed her contributions. Now she approached decisions with clarity and purpose, balancing practicality with creativity. Charles, too, found himself thriving under the spotlight. While he still preferred working behind the scenes, he stepped up to take on a leadership role when needed. He oversaw renovations to modernize certain areas of the inn without sacrificing its rustic charm, consulted with local artisans to create custom furnishings, and collaborated with filmmakers to ensure the property met their needs. Through it all, he relied heavily on Emma's input, valuing her instincts and ideas more than ever before. Their partnership blossomed not just in marriage, but in business, proving that two heads and hearts truly were better than one. Harold's transformation was perhaps the most surprising of all. Once a distant figure whose presence often caused tension, he had become an integral part of the inn's operations. He took charge of marketing efforts, leveraging his business acumen to attract high-profile clients and secure partnerships with travel agencies. More importantly, though, he mended fences within the family. Regular visits turned into weekly dinners, shared stories replaced old grievances, and moments of laughter softened years of silence. For the first time in decades, the Leavitts began to feel like a united front, a team working together toward a common goal. As the holiday season approached, the inn prepared for its busiest time of the year. Guests booked rooms months in advance, eager to celebrate Christmas surrounded by the cozy ambiance and breathtaking views. Emma and Charles decorated every corner of the building, adorning the lobby with twinkling lights, garlands, and a towering Christmas tree. They hosted festive events, caroling nights, cookie baking sessions, and even a screening of classic holiday films in the lounge, all designed to bring people together and create lasting memories. One evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily outside, the entire staff gathered in the dining area for a special celebration. It was a tradition Emma had started earlier that year, a thank you dinner to show appreciation for everyone's hard work. Plates of roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce filled the tables, while candles flickered softly in the center of each setting. Laughter echoed off the walls as employees swapped funny anecdotes from the past few months, sharing tales of quirky guests and unexpected mishaps. At the head of the table sat Emma, Charles, and Harold. Watching them interact, one might never guess the fractures that had once divided them. Harold raised his glass, signaling for attention. "I just want to say," he began, his voice unusually tender, "that I'm proud of what we've accomplished here. This inn isn't just a building. It's a testament to resilience, teamwork, and love, and I couldn't be prouder to call it my home." The room erupted in applause, followed by heartfelt cheers. Emma wiped away a tear, overwhelmed by the moment. Charles squeezed her hand under the table, a silent reminder of how far they'd come. Even Harold looked emotional, though he tried to hide it behind a gruff cough. After the meal, Emma stood up to address the group. "This year has taught us so much," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "We've learned that mistakes can lead to growth, that honesty can mend broken relationships, and that kindness can turn strangers into friends. None of this would have been possible without all of you. Thank you for being part of our journey." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. As the night wore on, conversations flowed freely, bonds strengthened, and hearts swelled with gratitude. By the time dessert was served, a decadent chocolate cake topped with peppermint sprinkles, the atmosphere was electric with joy and camaraderie. The following morning, as sunlight streamed through the frosted windows, Emma and Charles stood side by side on the inn's balcony, gazing out at the snow-covered valley below. The world seemed impossibly peaceful, untouched by the chaos of everyday life. For a while, neither spoke, content simply to soak in the beauty around them. "You know," Emma said, finally breaking the silence, "when I look back on everything that's happened this year, I realize something important. We didn't just save the inn, we saved ourselves, all of us." Charles nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And we did it together. That's what makes it so special." Behind them, Harold joined the pair, carrying 3 steaming mugs of hot cocoa. "Here," he said, handing one to each of them. "A toast to new beginnings." They clinked their mugs together, smiling as steam curled upward into the crisp winter air. In that moment, surrounded by the people and place they loved most, they knew they had weathered the storm and emerged stronger for it. As the year drew to a close, the Mountain View Inn stood as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of second chances. Its halls whispered stories of forgiveness and redemption. Its rooms bore witness to countless connections, and its future shimmered with promise. Through all the twists and turns, one truth remained clear. Sometimes, the smallest decisions can set off the grandest transformations and leave behind legacies that endure for generations to come.